Heading into Saturday, the odds makers thought the double champ would probably hold on to his heavyweight title, and in the end, well, he did pretty much that. But nevertheless, a ton of interesting performances to talk about at UFC 230. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas, next to Chuck Mindenhall. This is the MMA Fighting UFC 230 post-fight show. Chuck, as I alluded to, there was the double champ. He was here at the post-fight presser just moments ago in all of his glory with both of his belts and his black shirt and a bunch of other accoutrements. Nevertheless, he did what we all kind of thought he was basically going to do. And we'll talk about Derrick Lewis in a moment, but let's reflect here on the champ's performance, taking this fight on short notice, and then just kind of doing what we had all kind of anticipated. Any big insight into this fight?
Just how sensible and smart he really is, because he knew he could do this. He mentions right off the top, that he wasn't going to take a Miocic fight under the same circumstances because he would need a full camp for that one. His ability to assess the situation is just really second to none in the UFC. I mean, you watch what he was able to do, and he makes it look easy. And that's just something. Like, Derrick Lewis has won 9 out of 10 fights. You know, this guy wasn't a joke. So it was, for him to make it look as easy as he did, and as telegraphed as we knew what he was going to try to do, but he was able to do it, and he made it look pretty easy.
An interesting stat came out of this fight. Daniel Cormier turns out to be the first fighter in UFC history to successfully defend a title in 2 different weight classes. An unbelievable achievement. He keeps trying to do things that enable him to move on from Jon Jones, and I think he's being pretty successful in that regard.
Yeah, I'll say so. And it is a testament to him. I mean, to just be able to persevere. I think some people maybe wouldn't have bounced back from the losses against Jon Jones in the same way. He has been made into memes. He has had so many strange things happen in his life, throughout his life. Tragic things, weird curveballs that he couldn't have anticipated. But just for him to just to kind of make it part of his story, accept it, and keep using it, and use his knowledge and everything else, it's been an amazing thing. And I think, especially here at the end of his career, you can appreciate that guy. And when he was in Boston, and he fought Ozdemir, and he fought that one, I remember thinking how down to earth he really was. These are not post-fight press conferences. These are just these conversations he has.
Who does that?
Yeah. Who does that? It's hard to believe he was even in a fight.
Right. So, were you out on the floor for the main event?
Yeah, I was.
Now, one interesting thing is that we always talked about how he used to be booed and how it's changing. I don't think I heard any boos. Now, maybe once he went for the first takedown, but I'm talking about during the intro. He seems like he has become much more of a celebrated figure at this point.
I think you're right about that. I did hear a few boos. I wouldn't.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
There were a few.
Well, New York has Rangers fans. I mean, come on.
They're degenerates there, but I did hear a few. But on whole, if you go back to other fights of his career, because he went through a pretty tough stretch where I felt like he was never going to win the public over. I just felt like he was the guy, for whatever reason, he was not going to translate into that sense. I think through the course of time, just his perseverance, making the achievements he has, and really how he's handled the Jon Jones situation as it keeps going. He talks about it so sensibly that you can't help but understand. I feel like he's one of you. He is part of the media. So he's part of the media, but he understands fans. So I think he's finally come around where people are like, he's a very unique guy.
And he was addressing the Jon Jones questions, saying Jon Jones, I think on Friday at the post-fight presser, saying that, I'm not going to deign to give him a shot at this point. And he sort of looked around at both of his belts and he's like, who's giving who what here? Which is also kind of interesting. Just for the fight itself, though, I also thought it was just a showcase in who Daniel Cormier is. He noted he went for a front headlock ankle pick, then he ran the pipe, and then he shelved the takedown, and all. It was just a reminder of how incredibly versatile this guy is. Not merely as somebody who can talk to the media and do everything else, but as a fighter as well. Incredibly dominant display. Anything else from that fight, as brief and sort of one-sided as it may have been, you can take away from the Cormier side of things?
Only on it really reminded me a little bit of the Anderson Silva fight, because Anderson Silva, he took that on very short notice. Obviously, he was still in shape. He was planning for a different guy.
Oh, you mean at UFC 200?
Yes, at UFC 200 when he fought Anderson Silva. Very similar in the sense he was like, okay, how am I going to beat Anderson Silva? Here's what I'm going to do. And he went out and exacted it. People booed him on that one. But this one, I felt like people would have thought he's a fool if he went in there and just started swinging with Derrick Lewis. So again, it was just his fight acumen, like how smart he is going into something like this.
He's always going to do it the right way, something like that. Now that takes us to Derrick Lewis, the challenger. He looked a little forlorn to be here. You could tell he didn't really want to talk to the media. I certainly cannot blame him for that. What was kind of interesting for me was I picked up on this idea that, in the lead up to the fight, he was like, I don't really care about being the best fighter. I just kind of want to do the right thing by my family. But you looked at him on stage, And you could tell as a competitor, it actually bothered him that it went so one-sidedly.
Yes, and that was interesting because actually that occurred to me as he was saying, like, why am I here? Why am I talking about this? Why I lost? Because that was a little bit at odds with his attitude.
And he was ready to go. He was in shape. The back was fine. He was not making excuses.
He did not make excuses. Kudos to him because he had the perfect platform right now to make excuses. Derrick Lewis is just different, man. I feel like he kind of sometimes you had a run-in with him before all the fights where he told you one thing and then something else happened.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Big Fibber McGee.
So it's a little bit difficult to really read his full mindset, but I do think he's disappointed, man. Come on, the reason he's here is because he showed heart and perseverance. He doesn't have that unless he wants to win these fights. So he digs deep when he has to. He just wasn't able to dig deep in this one.
Any big stock changes up or down for either of these guys? Now, changes maybe, but big ones? What do you think?
Not really. I mean, to me, we're kind of right where we were because I think that since we knew that the Brock Lesnar fight with Daniel Cormier was already on the horizon, probably, he's just right back to that. I think it was a legacy stuffer for him. He could come in here, do Madison Square Garden. He did that. He performed brilliantly, and he got paid. And Derrick Lewis picked up some money too. And if he
certainly did,
whatever level he means when he says he doesn't matter to him if he's the greatest fighter, he can tap into that side of himself and be like, hey, I still got paid a lot too.
Right, he can. Now, last thing about this, Daniel Cormier saying there's no chance he goes to light heavyweight unless it's for Jones.
Right.
And even then, that's only if something goes totally wrong at heavyweight, right? So he's not going to go back. If you had to think about what might be next, if it's Jones under a weird circumstance, or it's Lesnar, or he even said if it's not Lesnar, it could be Stipe, but it won't be like Gustafsson, for example. There's no chance he would do that. What do you think is next for him? And by the way, he did say that the March timeline could be the very end of it. It could be the retirement fight for Daniel Cormier.
It reminded me of at the end of the football season when all the wild card scenarios are coming out. You're like, well, if this happens, we'll do this. If this happens, he'll be gone. That was kind of what it was like. But it's interesting to hear him, again, very reasonably say, Brock Lesnar is my last fight. If for some reason that fight can't come together and Jon Jones is available, I will cut the weight and do that. So he's already preparing. He's already telling you exactly what's on his mind. And if for some reason neither one of those can have it, Jon Jones loses to Gustafsson, then it will be Stipe Miocic.
Right.
It's just like he's establishing a pecking order and preference order, which is probably the smartest way you can be for the last fight of your career. You understand him the whole step of the way. What else do you want? Because people would complain one way or another, but at least he's telling you up front kind of what's on his mind. So I think what happens, obviously, is going to be the Brock Lesnar fight. And I think that people have got behind that on the level that they mean it. It'd be a big fight. It may not have... it'd be a big fight in terms of his payday and his swan song, and of course Brock Lesnar come back. It'd be a big fight, but it may not be for greatness at that point.
I think he did, Cormier, everything he was supposed to and reasonably could have expected to be doing this weekend, including with promotion, not just the fight itself, to ensure his best chance of getting the Brock Lesnar fight. Whether he gets it, I don't know.
Right.
Now, that takes us to the co-main event. Gegard Mousasi defeating Chris Weidman. Boy, I got to say, this was first of all, phenomenal fight, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Let's work backwards, shall we? The stoppage. I thought that was a horrendous stoppage. And I made this point before. Look, I like Big Dan Brigliotta, and he has an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah.
But you have to call bad stoppages what they are. That was a bad one. When Weidman, hit the canvas like a mannequin, and then as I put it on my previous explanation, he wasn't looking up Weidman. He was sort of looking through the ceiling. Yeah. That's when you know it's time to go. He let it continue. Were you as bothered as I was by that stoppage?
Where I was sitting, it was difficult to see. Like people on TV,
What was your vantage point?
My vantage point was right there, like on the side from cage side, front row right cage side. So I'm watching it, and I just saw him go down. Now the way he went down looked like he was out. That doesn't always tell you that they are. Sometimes they're just stunned and they go down awkwardly. But as you saw the replays and everything, and you think about his vantage point in terms of the referee, you wonder what was going on. The other signal, obviously, is that a guy like Jacare, who he's got a killer instinct. It's not like he's just going to stop. I don't think he would just stop in a situation unless it was warranted. And you could see him just like reluctantly looking at the ref, like, "What? You want me to continue to punch him?" And that's always a bad look. And then reluctantly he starts doing some hammer fists and right away gets stopped. So it didn't bother me in the moment, but as I saw the replay and I understood that it was pretty obvious from the other vantage points, it bothered me more.
So let's talk about the fight itself. And by the way, Jacare, to your point, not a guy who's unaccustomed to finishing off people with his hands, by the way. So he's been in scenarios like these. So let's talk about Jacare. First round, getting kind of tuned up with the jab. Second round, making some adjustments, making it wild, getting into clinch, going to the body. I'm amazed by this guy.
Yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu black belt who's really worked on his craft. 39 in December. Next month, he'll be 39 years old, and he's in a bit of a limbo, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you cannot but do anything but take your hat off to this guy.
Yeah.
An incredible, gutsy veteran, well-rounded performance.
It's crazy that the two big performances like that are both guys who are like 39. Isn't that nuts? Like you're talking about Danny Cormier.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you say about him? Because I thought Chris Weidman, his whole demeanor going into this fight was very serious. We were talking about this.
In.
Yeah, he was dialed in. He looked like the old guy. I thought he was loose. He was hungry. He went in that first round. He was piecing him up. He was getting, his good combos. He was getting out of the way. Wasn't getting hit. He wasn't testing his shit. I was thinking, wow, this is like Chris Weidman. He's back. Like he got him a couple of times. So to see that second round, where you see Jacare just hunting him down, stalking him, throwing the punches, hitting him in the body, like he kept hitting him in the body, and I just at that point you're thinking, Jacare is a beast, man. He's just a beast, and for him to get it done in the end, the crowd, being partisan crowd for Chris Weidman, to hear that groan in the room and to see his corner celebrating, that was a crazy moment. I'll remember that one.
Now, that puts Jacare in a good but sort of also unenviable position because this is a tremendous win. In fact, he was saying the best one of his career.
Yeah.
But you've lost to both guys who are now in the next title fight. So what the hell happens here?
Well, see, that was the complexity going in. You could actually step back and say, well, what happens if Jacare wins? It's not very easy to figure out. The good thing is,
by the way, didn't just win by stoppage.
True, and I think that the good thing is for him right now is, if you want to look at it this way as a silver lining, is there's a title fight already made. He doesn't have to be a part of that scenario, but he could be, though, obviously, because he just slid into this one due to extenuating circumstances. So I suppose he could get into it. The best thing for him at this point, after this win, is to be that guy that they could possibly look at if for something. We heard Adesanya, who I think some people thought could skip the queue and kind of get up there. We heard him say he wants time off. Well, who's the next guy? It could be somebody like Jacare. So it's not altogether out of the picture that he gets that next crack.
Right. Now that takes us to Weidman. 4 of his last 5 he's lost. The only one he's won is the Gastelum one in his last 5, which he's not out here fighting chumps, and some of those have been controversial, I get, but the Romero one was not. This one probably was not either, to be quite candid with you. And so it puts him in a bit of a tough position. What does he do? Does he retool at 34 years old at middleweight? Does he go to light heavyweight? Because here's the thing. He's looking good early, and then he's losing in these third rounds. Have you noticed that? When he gets, I don't remember which one the Mousasi one was, but it certainly passed a little bit later. Romero catching him late, Jacare catching him late. Maybe he looked dialed in, but maybe light heavyweight's a little bit better for him.
I think he should. I mean, I really do. He'd already contemplated it, I think. There's fresh challenges. There's also just reinvention. There's points in your career where I think just getting a different look and going to somewhere else where you can just kind of etch a sketch, shake, and be like, hey, you know what, I'm starting over here. I think sometimes that just helps these guys mentally. The hard thing for him is I think he had done that. I think he really did go into this fight with a very clean mindset and felt reinvigorated and all that. So it was a kind of a shame and really kind of tragic in the sense like when you look back to who was lobbying to get who was lobbying hardest to bring MMA here, right? It was Chris Weidman, and he was always at the front and center of this. He wanted to fight, and we talked about him in Madison Square Garden. He gets a second chance after that Yoel Romero thing, and then he has basically the same thing happen. That's going to be very, very hard toll for him, to take 0-2 at Madison Square Garden, the place you dreamed to fight.
1-3 in New York.
1-3 in New York, yep.
And he was so close to being 2-2 here. If he would hit one, it would have been the Jacare win and the Gastelum win. You could have written off the Mousasi one. Okay, not the Romero one. But
exactly.
He was winning that one early anyway, as I mentioned. So he's got some tough choices ahead of him. I guess we'll see what happens. Now, the other bright star on this, Jesus Christ. I don't even know what to say. Israel Adesanya is amazing. Defeating Derrick Brunson at 4:51, I believe the time was, of the first round. I won't say he did whatever he wanted because that's not true. Early on, Brunson was kind of all over him. But he was stuffing the takedowns, creating separation, getting his back off the fence. And then he just lit him on fire. Israel Adesanya is on a rocket ship to the stars, ladies and gentlemen.
Man, it wasn't pretty until the moment it was pretty, because it was one of those situations. Brunson was going after him, headhunting. We knew he would do this. He was kind of making it rough. He was taking him in. He was kind of pushing him against the cage a little bit. And you're thinking, this may be a tough night. It may be where he has to kind of grind out a win or something like that. But as soon as he tagged them the first time, this is always, you look at these guys with this kind of swagger, you see it slow down for them. This isn't a guy who jumped in all nuts and wanted to go for the kill. It slowed down for him. You could see him dial in. You could see him drop his hands and just take his time, making sure. Like you said, he's like a surgeon. Like every shot means something. He wants to touch his chin. You could see that. And when you see that type of thing, that makes you see that it factor that we always talk about. That's when you see it in full. So when you see a guy in that situation.
No, I think part of the reason they have this it factor is a lot of people think you can just will yourself to greatness by saying these things, and to some extent you can, actually.
Right.
It really is true, the power of belief. But I don't think he's trying to raise himself to a level. He has experienced it with other men, and it has told him who he is in the pecking order. He just takes that to the next fight. I spoke to him privately over here in the corner, and he was telling me, he mentioned it here briefly. I was saying, like, what was your reaction after it was over? He goes, I couldn't believe how slow Derrick Brunson was. Like, he could just see everything move in a way that none of the rest of us could. And
it was reminiscent, honestly, of the Silva. We were talking about the Silva Griffin fight, where you see the difference suddenly. Like you see it in real time, and it actually calculates to your human eye, like your ability to see that, to discern the speed difference.
Now, what do they do with him though? That's still one part that's a little bit unresolved. He had mentioned if Weidman had won, they were going to put them together, which, by the way, would have been a hell of a contest. Another opportunity that's sort of lost in all of this. You mentioned Jacare. I guess they could do that. He didn't seem to think he wanted it because he was like, well, I beat him better than Jacare, but. In Jacare's defense, he beat Brunson twice.
Right.
So you do have to kind of count that. What do you think?
I could see that. I could see that
He also said he wanted the fight against Whitaker in Auckland, or at least in the Oceanic region, which I wouldn't be opposed to. But Whitaker, first of all, has business against Gastelum. So, like, what do they do here?
I think the Jacare one is a real option. I mean, the timing is correct, because they just were both on this thing. And I think every time you get two good showcases like that, it just naturally comes together. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight because you're looking at an escalation, right? Brunson, like you mentioned, Jacare beat Brunson. Well, Jacare would be in the next escalation for his career and maybe the penultimate one before he gets the title fight. So if they want to book something like that, I think that's completely on the right track for how they should handle him.
Okay. Well, anything else to say about Adesanya? Like, these moments, man, I've said this before, when you're catching a guy on his way up and they just begin to make you reimagine what's possible, to me, is outside of like a St. Pierre or John Jones title run, that's the best MMA gets.
When you start to understand that they're not blowhards, that was this performance. Because you see him talking the big game, and then you were like, he's not a blowhard. He actually does it.
Yeah, this is not an act. He actually is that good. A couple other strong performers on the card we should mention. Number one, how about Jared Cannonier? By the way, both he and Adesanya doing the mimicking of the urination dog style at the dog park. Apparently it works as a strategy.
Got to mark the cage.
Hey, you know what? Whatever gets them to win. You can't really argue too much. In any case, looking phenomenal against David Branch. David Branch is a very good competitor. He only really ever drops fights to the very best. Cannonier looks shredded. He mentioned making the weight was easy, and then he goes in there and he gets it done. I've said it before, Chuck, one of the best ways to get ahead in the modern UFC, be at a weight class you can maintain, stay injury-free, and when the phone calls, you answer and you say, I can make it, and he does. He just beat the number, 7 guy in the division.
Yeah, I think this was his performance where you start to see his real potential. I know Dana White was talking about it tonight, like he's believed in his potential, maybe gave him too much too soon with Glover Teixeira fight and things like that. It was tough for us to maybe know how good he could be, but I thought that tonight he showed it, man, and it'd be interesting to see kind of how he handles himself going forward, but to me, that was a really good performance. I thought he should have probably did he get a bonus? I don't know.
He did get a bonus. He found out on stage.
That's right. So he deserved that.
And then Carl Roberson getting a win over Sean Marshman. Workmanlike, but nevertheless pretty dominant. From the undercard, one fight I think worth mentioning, although there might have been some other ones. Certainly the Sajari Eubanks one over Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne Modafferi, I thought, had a pretty good defensive guard.
She did.
But in the end, Sarge just a little bit too much. Here's the thing, though, when I asked her about this, I said to her, I was like, well, you won, but you missed weight, and that matters for title contenders. Do you think they're going to hold it against you? She goes, they might. So what the hell are they going to do in women's flyweight?
Good question, man. I don't know. It would have been better for her if she'd made it more emphatic. But she did. Modafferi being as tough as she is, she was able to withstand basically the whole fight and go the distance. So it wasn't like this great performance in the end. It was a very good performance. But the asterisk of her missing weight, it's going to be tough. It's not just that. I think it's also that she doesn't show herself to really hold herself too accountable for it. I think that there might have to be some adjustment in her attitude too for the UFC to kind of get behind her on that.
Anything else stand out to you about the card worth mentioning?
Man,
I got one in my head.
Well, the early fight with Venata obviously was like a really good fight. We were watching that back here together before I went out
with
to
Frivola.
Yeah, exactly. So that one stands out. I thought that was a slam dunk for a bonus. But apparently, you always know it's a good fight card when other ones kind of drown that out in the end.
Right. How about the Julio Arce and Shevan Moraes fight with the incredible amounts of blood?
Yeah, there was a lot of blood.
And Julio Arce still kind of getting after it, right? The whole time pressing forward.
Anytime you see a guy do that with their blood all over both guys, and you know the guy bleeding is still going forward, I mean, that always tells me something about that guy, because if you're bleeding that badly, and he was bleeding badly,
Yeah.
it's to the point where you're like, at some point I would start to freak out about how much blood I'm losing. But he obviously did not even think twice about that.
And they're always like, oh, it's no big deal, it's just blood. I'm like, you mean the thing that gives you life? That's the thing you don't care about losing? Okay, whatever. I mean, that's why they're fighters, right?
Yeah.
Overall, last thing about this, there's a lot of consternation about how this card would have done at MSG, and Daniel Cormier saying, hey, look, man, I fight the sellouts,
Yeah.
or close to them,
Yeah.
or packed
Yeah.
crowds.
It was
By the
pretty
time
crowded.
he fought in the main event, what was it like out there?
Crowded. I mean, there was like one section on a corner where you could see that they were just MCs. They probably partitioned off. They didn't sell those, but ultimately everywhere else,
Pretty good?
Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. I mean, I think he is a draw, and it felt like a big event when they dropped the lights and he came out. Daniel Cormier has that. You know?
Cormier's got a bit of a Michael Bisping thing going on, where in the last chapter of his career, he's making the big fights in the big bank.
He is.
Good for
He
him,
is, man.
All right, what a night, man. What
That
a
was
week.
fun.
It's been
It
a
was
long
fun.
week, and my liver hurts from drinking so much, so I'm going to go get some rest. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget, tons of coverage coming your way still all next week. The crew behind the scenes are going to go right to Denver, so we're going to be covering that. MMA Hour is going to be on Monday. Please tune in for that. A-Side live chats on Wednesday. It just doesn't stop over here. So we really appreciate you guys tuning in. That's Chuck. I'm Luke for the whole MMA Fighting crew. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time on the road.